guys are new here, hello. My name is Amanda and I teach DIYers like yourself how to sew beautifully handmade garments. So you should hit the subscribe button down below and turn on notifications so you can be alerted when I post new videos. Now today's dress was an inspired dress that I posted about 2 videos ago in my haul video. Put the video in the links up there. And I was initially inspired by the box pleats on the dress. I kind of drafted the same pattern, but I ended up changing it, and now it's a little bit more 18th century Robe A La Francaise. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Don't kill me in the comments, okay? But it's kind of inspired by that. That's kind of what it turned into. And also make sure to stay tuned to the end because I tell you all the things that I'll do differently next time. So let's get started. Okay, so to start off, you're gonna need 5 yards of fabric for your face. I'm using a matte satin here, and the link will be below in the description box. Then I'm going to underline with a white muslin as always. And I have 5 yards of that as well. And you also need 5 yards of a lining fabric. I'm gonna put the link in the description box for that as well. Okay, so I got all my fabric laid out, and I actually folded it on the crossrise grain so that I wouldn't have to cut a separate piece for that face skirt. So this is 5 yards, is more than enough to make 2 gowns front. Okay, so to start off, I need my bodice front, my modesty panel, my bodice back, my bodice strap, and my bow. I'm gonna go ahead and interface them. Now that I have them interfaced, I'm gonna go ahead and get them ready for underlining. So I'm just showing you all the pieces, just the same pieces as before. Here is my bodice front piece, and I have my underlining underneath my interfaced satin piece, and I'm going to go ahead and underline it. If you guys need a more detailed tutorial on how to underline, I have a video up on my channel. I'm going to put the link here in the cards, so go ahead and pause this video and check that out and then come back. Okay, so now that I have my bodice front piece underlined, I'm going to do the same for my back pieces and my straps. So now that I have them all done, I'm going to go ahead and start assembling. I'm pinning my back pieces to my front pieces right sides together, and I'm also pinning the strap pieces onto the front as well, and the back, and I'm matching my notches. So I'm going to go ahead and pin those. Notice that I'm matching the notches. There's a double notch for the back and a single notch for the front, so that's how I know how to line up my pieces. Since I'm here at my sewing table, I'm also going to start pinning the bow pieces. I'm pinning them the short ways, but make sure you pin them the long ways so that you have the same bow as me in the end. And do that also to the other bow piece as well. I'm also going to work on the modesty panel pieces. These are the small pieces, and I ended up not using them. I made them a lot bigger, so the pattern that you actually download will have the bigger pieces. I'm also going to work on my corset loop. I'm putting it right sides together, and I'm going to sew a centimeter seam allowance for that. These are my bow tails. I'm putting those right sides together as well. I'm working on my corset lacing. I'm sewing a centimeter seam allowance for all of the pieces that I assembled. So I'm going to go ahead and sew my side seams, both side seams. I'm also going to sew the straps on. Now the straps are drafted as rectangle, and the pieces on the bodice that they attach to are curves, so make sure to sew the curves in. And I'm also sewing the modesty panel, making sure to leave a gap so that I can turn the modesty panel right side out. Here is the bow. Like I said, I folded it long ways. I liked it better this way, and I'm sewing it together right sides together with a centimeter seam allowance, and I'm doing that for both bow pieces. Now that I have that done, I'm going to sew together all of the loops. The loops are the corset loops, the corset lacing, the bow middle, and the bow tails. So I'm going to go ahead and sew all those right sides together with a centimeter seam allowance. For the bow tails, I'm gonna make sure to stop about 1 inch from the bottom, pivot my needle, and sew down to the edge at an angle. You wanna make sure that you have your bodice assembled, your bow tails, your corset loops, your corset lacing, your modesty panel, your bow middle, and your bow pieces. And since my fabric frays like crazy, I'm going to pink all of my seams. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn my bow pieces right side out. And I'm just showing you how they would look, how it will look when you fold it in half. And this will essentially be our bow. And I'm going to go ahead and give that a good press, making sure that the seam is in the middle. And I'm also pressing my bodice side seams open, and I'm making sure to press my strap pieces towards the bodice. Okay, so my next step is to sew a stay stitch. I'm sewing 1 centimeter away from the edge, and I'm sewing that all around the bodice piece, including the straps and the armhole areas. The purpose of the stay stitch is to keep the neckline from stretching, and it also serves as a good line or a good guideline for me to be able to turn down the seam allowance to sew it down to the underlining. The next step is to measure down a piece of boning. You want to go under the centimeter seam allowance there and over the centimeter seam allowance for the zipper. I'm using a 1/4 inch or 8 millimeter wriggling boning here, but I later switched it to the 12 millimeter. And I'm going to go ahead and take my loops that I turned out, and I'm going to pin that to my boning spaced 1/2 inch apart. If you guys have any questions or you want an in-detail tutorial on how to make corset loops, give this video a thumbs up and comment down below, and I'll be more than happy to make an in-detail tutorial for you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and sew that to my bodice pieces. I'm sewing 2 rows of stitches. After we've done that, you want to go ahead and slash the top of the seam allowance where the zipper will go, just so when we apply the zipper, it turns in easily. And I'm going to go ahead and slash the underarm seams as well, so those can turn in smoothly. Here I'm going to go ahead and catch stitch down my seam allowance to my underlining, just to keep everything nice and neat and flat. And I'm also going to catch stitch down all of my seam allowance around the neckline, including the sleeves. If you're liking this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already yet, and give this video a big thumbs up so I can know to keep creating more sewing videos like this. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I do a fair bit of hand sewing, and let me tell you, my hands are worn out. They are hurting. So my question of the day is, What do you guys do to relieve the pain in your hands from hand sewing or working with your hands in general? Leave a comment down below and let me know. Moving on, I'm going to go ahead and sew the side seams of my skirt pieces. I'm putting them right sides together, and I'm sewing them with a 1cm seam allowance. And I'm going to assemble my lining the same way. Now that I have them assembled, I'm going to go ahead and put them together. I'm putting them together wrong side to wrong side, matching up all of the seam lines. And I'm going to make sure to pin at each seam line. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew these together with a 1cm seam allowance, making sure that I leave about a 5-inch hole in the seam to make sure that I can turn my fabric white side out when I finish the hem. And these fabrics are the same, the patterns are the same, but I still had to do quite a bit of easing here. From the right side of the fabric, I'm turning it inward 1 centimeter to the wrong side, and I'm putting my hand through the gap that we left, and I'm pinching that seam allowance, and I'm using that to turn it wrong side out. And I'm gonna go ahead and sew those together with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now keep in mind, the lining is about 2 centimeters shorter than the face, so there will be quite a bit of easing here, but if you take your time, it will work. The main thing is to match up all of your side seams and the center back seams so that you know your pieces are aligned correctly, and then you just ease the fullness between them. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn the pieces right side out. And I'm closing the top edge that we left open. And this is what it looks like. Now it's important to go ahead at this point and give this piece a good press all the way up. Next step is to do the pleats. Now it's going to be really hard for me to explain the pleats, so you can either just watch and follow along, or the pattern pieces actually have all the pleats marked and the directions that the pleats go. You can follow along with the pattern. Now pretty much it's a inverted box pleat on the center front, and then it's a double knife pleat on either side of that, and then there's a pleat coming from the side back that goes and covers the side seam onto the front, and then 2 more knife pleats facing the center back. And I'm going to secure that with a roll of stitching. After I've done that, it's time to attach the bodice to the skirt. And it took a little bit of easing as well, because I kind of changed the pattern of pleating so it didn't exactly match up with the bodice piece, but like everything else, you know, we make it work. And I'm going to go ahead and sew that together with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And since my fabric is fraying like crazy again, I'm going to go ahead and pink that seam. And that's what it looks like. So the next step would be to insert the zipper. I ended up not using the zipper because when I did a fitting, my measurements were wrong somehow, and the skirt part did not fit my little girl. So I had to rip out the zipper and put in a full corset back, which was fine. And it ended up looking like this. And I also had to extend the modesty panel, so I made it a little bit bigger. And the pattern that I have for download has this version, and it also has the version with the zipper, so you can go ahead and choose which one you want. I sewed it down with the 1/2 inch boning, and I also added a 1/2 inch boning in the side seams where the princess seams would be, to make sure that the sweetheart neckline stays up, because when I did the fitting, it was drooping a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that my daughter was covered all the way. For the beaded portion, you're going to need some Swarovski crystals, some sequins, assorted beads, I'll link those down below, and a thread and some scissors and a really small needle. Now it will be really hard for me to explain how to bead this, just because it would take the whole video's length to explain how I did this pattern. So if you guys want a detailed video on how I did this beading pattern, then leave a comment down below and I'll try to make a dedicated video on how I do my hand beading. But the pattern is pretty much crystal, and then 2 of the elongated beads, and then 2 of the round beads with the sequence at the bottom, and then it goes down with 2 more of the elongated beads. I'm not sure what they're called, I apologize. And then there's a crystal at the bottom, and it just kind of repeats itself over and over again. Now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the bow. I'm putting the pieces right sides together, and I'm sewing them on both sides, right sides together, with a centimeter seam allowance. Now I'm finding the center, which would be where the seam's at, and I'm going to go ahead and pleat it down and secure it with the bow center. And so this is what the bow looks like once it's created, and I also have the tails that we did earlier. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the tails to the bow piece. I'm just going to hand sew them on, folding down the seam allowance there at the top so there's no raw edges showing, and I'm just going to go ahead and sew those on. Now I'm not really proud of this bow. I know I can do better, but you know. So next is the lining, which is finally the last step. I assembled the lining how we assembled the bodice, and I also did the stay stitch all the way around, and then I ironed the seam allowance down. And now I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch down my lining to my bodice piece. There you go. We have a beaded sweetheart neckline with off the shoulder sleeves, and it is fully lined from top to bottom. It has a corset back with a modesty panel and a beautiful bow at the bottom. It's definitely not 100% perfect, but I'm very proud on how it turned out, and I cannot wait to make this design again. Thank you guys for watching my video. I truly appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button before you leave if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in my next one.